Good morning and welcome, and thank you for coming to our information webinar today from KNX UK. I'm down in the south of England in Hampshire, and Tracy, who's coordinating all of this, is up in Berkshire, and we welcome you to our webinar today. Welcome to KNX Sustainability Month. I am based in the United Kingdom, and we at KNX UK are the national group for KNX in this country, and we are delighted to be contributing to this initiative this month. This month's activities demonstrate the worldwide acceptance of the absolute need to make our personal impact more sustainable. And we are here to inform you why KNX is such an important part of that inescapable requirement. Today, I will talk to you about building control systems, but more specifically, what is an energy efficient system, and can an energy efficient system be sustainable? Now, why does this affect you? Well, you can, in the future, offer your clients a route to added value through efficient design, where you can offer automated systems for buildings to reduce cost of those buildings, both at the build stage, but more significantly during operation. If you offer your clients an actual saving on their energy bill, they will be listening to you. And if you assure them that the choices you offer will adapt to any change, they will be wanting to know more. With that in mind, you must be looking to offer solutions that are robust, effective, and won't be outdated thanks to upgrades. This is what the system that is sustainable truly is. For today's presentation, I will be talking to you about building controls and systems. This includes technology-led solutions and how those are implementing and coming and converging into our marketplace. I will also talk about the lifespan of products that you use to control buildings and the solutions that are provided, and discussing why that is important. And then looking at how specific systems can achieve this, what the true power of KNX is, and then finally, how you can use these solutions to provision your clients and yourselves to a better building for the future. So what are building controls? Well, at the very basic end of it, a light switch is a building control, or one part of a building control. You're using a remote method to switch a light on and off, albeit one that's incredibly old in its design, but reliable, functional, a well-known utilization of a product to achieve an end aim, and that is your light switch. A room thermostat that you use to control your heating, that is a form of building control. It's controlling your heating system, albeit on a whole building basis in a house. And we can talk a little bit more about how that gets nuanced down in a bit more detail a bit later. And a controller for a fan, it might be a simple bathroom fan where you have an isolating switch outside of the door, or it could be a fan where you can adjust the speed, you can tell it to extract or input air. So they're all forms of building control, but in most of our experience, very isolated, disparate, not linked, not working together, not sharing any form of connection. Bringing things to a bit more of a modern slant, more modern heating systems where you'd have a room thermostat in every room. That is moving farther forwards towards building or whole building control systems. Intruder alarm systems, very well utilized, and it's a way of controlling the security of a building or property, monitoring when the doors are open or shut, if the windows have been broken, for instance, and effectively if an intruder is in your property. Lighting control systems. Some people may have had an extension or an additional part of the building added, and a type of lighting control system may have been considered to be appropriate. A good example would be a cinema room, where perhaps the installer has suggested you having some automated lighting that dims when you turn the cinema on. We're quite familiar with these kind of things, but they're all part and form part of building control systems. Moving forward a bit more technologically, you go into photovoltaics and PV and how that works and how that interacts both in a smart metering basis, but also how you monopolize on the energy that you are creating. and that can be through battery storage, and then it can be through strategic charging of your e-car when energy rates are at the lowest, perhaps during the night when the energy companies offer you cheap and sometimes even pay you to use energy in order to get rid of their surplus. Then you get into large building systems. If any of you work in a large office building or a corporate building, or even when you go to your local supermarket, there will be a building control system monitoring the environmental control within that property, that building. The bigger the building, the more sophisticated and the larger the plant. Indicator panels for staff and maintenance so that the facilities management team at a building are aware of a fault and can react to it accordingly. E-reporting systems where things become a little bit more sophisticated, albeit this is 20-plus-year-old technology now, whereby the FM team, the facilities management team, may receive an email from a piece of plant that's saying, I've got a problem, can you help? And the systems talk and just ping out an email that's albeit generic in its makeup, but it will indicate perhaps which air handling unit is at fault, number 7, for instance. And then the adaptability for occupiers and tenants. So one company's required floor space and utilization is completely different from another. So is that system of building controls able to be adapted suitably for each tenant as they come in? And then the adaptability of these building control systems to meet changes in regulations. And that is a constantly evolving set of targets, and it's a constantly changing set of parameters, but you need to make sure that the building controls you're working with are working in parallel with regulation change. And then you have to look at what kind of buildings all of these apply to. Well, it can be the most basic house, it could be a small restaurant in your village or town, it could be a small shop, a barber's, or a mini supermarket. Then you could be looking at smart buildings, and that could be a nice large home which has got all the features, some motion detection, some interaction with the intruder alarm, for instance, so that all the lights come on if there is an alert. And then you can add things like facade management, which we would call curtains and blinds normally, but may also include motorized windows. Then you're going to sophisticated, very highly sophisticated buildings, and this would be more on a corporate level with big businesses wanting to extrapolate data, and that data can then be shared across buildings, across the company's corporate infrastructure, so that they can analyze their energy use, their water use, their pound per member of staff, for instance, in a building. And then you're looking at future buildings which are coming on stream, where definitely things like AI will come to the forefront, and they won't necessarily be admitting members of staff to the building, but they'll be using data rich output from buildings to strategize when this building is going to need the highest level of energy. That might mean storing more energy over the weekend when it's cheap into battery storage to then be deployed first thing Monday morning when all of a sudden the building's a hive of activity. And then the interworking of all these technologies, we also have to consider how this is done and whether what we consider to be our main form of data interchange using IP or LAN, so this is networking on a data basis, is that going to be enough to provide all of the bandwidth, all of the data transfer that we need? Certainly at this stage, it's the common denominator, and the data is almost certainly at the high end transmitted along an IP network because of speed, reliability, and the sheer volumes of data. You could ask, do we actually need building controls? It's an immediate add-on to the cost of a build. When you're doing a retrofit or a refurbishment, it's a big ask to add an extra 5%, for example, onto the cost of the job in order to achieve some form of building controls. I'd argue it's absolutely necessary. If you're looking for a new car, it's highly unlikely you would go back to buy a 1982 Ford Fiesta in order to do your daily commute. You might buy one because that's your favorite car from your younger years, but you need a car that's reliable, one that's going to meet the needs every day. And we should be looking at buildings on exactly that basis. They need to be efficient, fit for purpose, adaptable. And so in truth, we are looking at all future buildings meeting this requirement in some way, shape, or form. And certainly the refurbishment market is far more significant in terms of the number of properties used and adapted. It's a far bigger share of the market than the new builds. So, um, examples that you're already aware of with building controls, your gates at the front of your house, perhaps, your garage door if you have an electric one, or you may have a smart front door lock, which allows you to open your front door without taking your keys out just from the proximity of your phone. And this is stuff that's intruding in our life on a daily basis and proving that it does have a place for us. Room thermostats. There are a few brands which are quite market dominant, and there are more brands coming on stream all the time, sorry. And I believe that the market utilization of smart thermostats is really strong, certainly in Western Europe. We also have the implementation of these things without our choice, really. We are using less and less television, for instance, and at some point, television is almost certainly likely to become only streamed. Um, that's not a choice I would make as a user of television for well over 50 years, but I'm going to have to adapt and adopt that as and when it becomes the norm. And this general convergence of technologies is happening all the time, and you'll quite often see the name works with something on a product, and that means that the technology is being effectively steered in your direction. We have legislative changes that are happening constantly, which is a good thing. We're burning less fossil fuels as a consequence. We're driving less miles. We're walking more. We're eating less fat-rich foods. All of these things are changes in part by personal choice, but also legislation is coming in to prevent us from making poorer choices. And most recently, certainly in the United Kingdom, we've had Part O of the building regulations, which is about preventing buildings from overheating, and Part F of the building regulations has been revised to put more of an emphasis on the effective ventilation of properties. And in the duration of this year so far, we've had the implementation of the new PSTI regulations, which have actually been in effect for over 6 months. I don't believe any cases have been brought against companies that don't meet them. But if you want to know more, we did a very interesting dive into this subject earlier on this year. And it will affect anyone who is manufacturing, selling, or installing products that connect to the wider internet in one way, shape, or form. And then generational change. Our Gen Z children are all digital natives. They do not watch regular TV anymore. I know that from my two um, late year teenagers, and their skill sets are very different from ours. If I asked my son, could he change the tire on his car or the wheel on his car, he'd probably struggle, if I'm honest. Whereas by the time I was his age, I think I had done it half a dozen times already. So their skill sets are very different from ours. And one thing they do expect is convenience. So having a building that does elements of what you need it to do on a regular basis for you is actually a really important part for them. And certainly as a parent, a lower pain point for me if it does do what they say or what they expect. So we've talked about building controls and what they are. They are everywhere, and we shouldn't be scared of them. Your car now almost always has air conditioning. It's not something you would have had 20 years ago. Your car will always have electric windows, might have self-shutting boot. It's got airbags everywhere. The environmental controls inside are so much better. Pollen filters, all of these things. We're very unlikely to regress with these steps in cars. And when you buy a new car now, whether you want them or not, these features are almost certainly webbed into the motor. So in building terms, at some point, you will look back at the building and think, when did all this happen? But it's happening and evolving constantly. So one thing with building controls is it's all well and good, but what happens when it stops working? And in truth, service engineers for building controls are top-end individuals. They're very highly trained. They have generally a wonderful interest in the technologies that they work with. It's a two-way street. They work hard, but they enjoy what they do. but that can mean their skill sets a bit more expensive, and that might be a reflection of where the market is with building controls and the fact that it's definitely not niche anymore, but it's still quite specialist. And actually, in other territories around the world, building controls of various types are included within electrical apprenticeship schemes or mechanical engineer apprenticeship schemes. And so our lack of knowledge on it, and certainly in this territory, is not helpful to counter that. So the lifespan and life cycle of these products is really important, and I know for a fact that I can attend a location with an existing system in it, and I can find products that are 20 plus years old that are functioning perfectly well and haven't failed. And I guess the product may have cost £100 when it was put in 20 plus years ago. That same product is probably replaceable for about 20% or 30% less. Um, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And one of the wonderful things about some technologies is their lifespan. And that's where we're going to go to next with this, is all about the sustainability of that as a consequence. So, how long will products last? Who make them? Who support them? Who owns the programming data to that installation? What happens if a product becomes unavailable? How do the manufacturers approach new requirements and new legislation? It's all there in terms of how they will look into the market and make sure that it keeps going and it's sustainable. So, what are the warranties like on any electronic product? You're looking at 12 months minimum. Some of them may be slightly higher, but you shouldn't necessarily focus on that. The strength of the warranty is almost wholly unquestioned. If there's a fault, there's a fault. It gets replaced, and that's the end of it. And in my experience, there's a very low failure rate. How and where are they made? They're made all over the place. They're made by top end manufacturers with Blue Angel awarded facilities, with high regard for social responsibility, energy utilization, how they care for their local geography, their local workforce. There's an inevitability of that, and invest in the future. Certainly, the factories I've seen that make products in this sector are all very high tech. There's a lot of them made in Central Europe, Germany in particular, but France, Spain, Portugal, the UK. We have products made in this country. And in fact, all over the planet, there is a reliance on electronic components from certain territories, but I believe all of those things are fairly well ironed out. It's how the world turns. Can the products be updated? Software terms, yes. In firmware terms, yes, where it's applicable within a KNX system. But this is really important. If the product all of a sudden becomes defunct because it won't update or change to suit an alteration, then it's a failure in the product. Um, how long will the building control system last? Does it expand and contract as needs arise? Can it be simply altered? Can parts be removed? Can parts be added? Will it adapt to new methodologies? What happens after networking, after LAN? Is there something else that's coming which will take over in that field? And so, will the system adapt to that? Will it be flexible enough to meet new regulations? Can you add things to it, take things away, change the way things are connected so that it meets the newer regulations? Is it secure? Can it be hacked? Can it be interfered with? Can it be put in such a way where it's robust beyond interference and security issues? And is it dependent on one company say so? Does one company have the answer and the response to every single question? That's a definite no. And then the final line, I mentioned it briefly a little while back, PSTI and red compliance. I urge you, if you don't know what they are, to investigate them just to understand what it actually means. It's a really good implementation of regulation. And it'll be interesting to see how it's enforced at some point. I'm going to go back to lifespan life cycle, and is it dependent on one company's say so? In our world of KNX, there are so many companies that one company would not be able to um, do anything significant enough to make a change on their own without one approval of the product type, and that it meets all of the required standards. And two, if they're trying to change the wheel, it's not going to work. There's another 500 plus companies that are prepared to carry on the way it is. And then at executive level, no one company sits at the top of the table. It's a board, and it's all decision by board. So that's where KNX meets that part of that question. An interesting fact I looked at this morning, in globally, 62 million tons, 62 million tons of e-waste. So that's circuit boards, batteries, all of these electronics that your kids get bored of, the toys, the bits from your dashboard in your car. 62 million tons of waste, e-waste annually is collected. Um, in the UK, surprisingly, and this would make me question the figures, we've actually got 6 million tons of collected e-waste. Now, that might mean we're really good at collecting it, or that we're producing 10% of the world's e-waste. I suspect it's the first one. I can't believe our tiny little island is producing 10% of the world's e-waste. However, what's probably more worrying is that only 31% of that e-waste, certainly in our country, is being recycled annually. So there's a big margin to go where unused electronics get turned back into generally new electronics. They're ground down, all the rare metals are removed and then put back into the system. And just to solidify that fact, per person in the UK, we are producing 24 kilos each of e-waste per year. So just imagine how many iPhones you'd have to throw in the bin to weigh 24 kilos. That's a lot of weight of e-waste, and that's per person. Don't read statistics, that's my advice. They're quite shocking. So, the sustainability of systems and how you can ensure that the solution that you're providing or specifying or requesting is going to give you what you want now and many, many, many years into the future. So, the system I'm here talking about that's on my top, all the slides are emblazoned with this, and in fact, the KNX Association in Brussels are hosting this global event. KNX's response to all of this is that the overarching way KNX works means that anyone can come to the KNX world. They can bring their best skill set, their best product, their best ideas to the table, carve out their own niche, or indeed join everyone else that's already producing products. And the one overarching requirement of a KNX product, and KNX is not a brand, it's a language, it's a protocol, it's not an ideology at all because it's actually fully functional, but it's a point in the sand where you can say, right, this is KNX. This is going to work. This is going to do what it says on the tin. This is going to provide my client, my building, my home with the solution I need. And the cast iron guarantee is that any product that wears a KNX badge will talk to any other product from any other manufacturer that wears the KNX badge without any additional gateways, software, or interworking. So you can have a product from company A and a product from company Z, put a cable between them, and they will be able to communicate if indeed that's what you want them to do after some programming. And that is an absolute must. So in a typical project, you might find 6, 7, 8 different manufacturers because a manufacturer may produce a better dimmer, another manufacturer may produce a better interface to the swimming pool, for instance. It really is all down to the job by job basis. KNX manufacturers, as you can see from my screen, the image up in the top right of this slide shows a handful of the companies. I don't think it's all 500 plus. But if you care to look at it for any length of time, you will find some huge world players who are in every single sector of manufacture globally, and this only ever increases. It's never got smaller. Some companies come in, find it's not for them, dip out, but the general trend is year on year, there are more and more member companies who are manufacturing KNX products. Another thing with KNX is it will talk to any third-party system. It's completely industry accepted. So a lot of the manufacturers of excuse me, proprietary closed system protocols actually produce gateways into the KNX world because they realize that their specialist field can't survive on its own in an isolated way or can have benefit from being connected to the KNX system within a building. And I mentioned data rich output earlier. That is exactly what it's about. You may want to use a trend system to control the HVAC in a big building. But if the trend and the KNX system are able to exchange data, that means that the KNX system may produce the temperature inputs for the trend system from a sensor that's also measuring movement in a bathroom or a communal toilet space. And that's maybe also telling the trend system to boost the fan in that area because it needs to have a higher duty rate. So any third-party system can be interfaced. And in fact, you'd be surprised how many proprietary protocols have their own protocol to KNX interface. Any product, if you can think of something that can be controlled electrically, it either has been done or could be done utilizing KNX as the backbone for that. Any country, KNX is global. There's not a territory on the planet that doesn't have exposure to KNX. The growth story is different for different territories, but when you think that it's in North America, Central America, South America, or Asia, India, the Australasias, throughout Europe, very dominant throughout Europe, it is truly a global player. Any application, doesn't matter what you're trying to do, the application is in place. You will be able to do that with KNX. Any utilization, boats, chicken sheds, factories, automated processing, the list is endless and the examples are incredibly compelling. And any regulation. I've been in the electrical industry for 3.5 decades, and every time something's come along, there's been a big palaver about new regulation coming in and the changes it makes. But these are all for betterment and improvement in both safety, primarily in my lifespan anyway, but certainly sustainability, environmental, green issues, all of these things. So KNX has constantly been able to adapt itself to any change in regulation. If you look at this graphic just there, that's the one. You'll see some of the elements that KNX already does, but I would say that list is not exhaustive. And if it's not on there and you've got a bright idea, please tell me, and I'll tell you whether a product already exists. So development and innovation, this is another part of a sustainable approach. If you create a product and throw it out to the market and say, right, that's it, it's the best thing in the world, good night, I'm retiring, your product will soon lapse into being antiquated and not fit for purpose. And certainly with a solution, I would suggest the solutions that don't have a proprietary language that everyone can use and everyone can produce for is by far a better situation to be in. And development and innovation are huge parts of that. So, why would a manufacturer choose to develop and produce KNX products? Well, what's sustainable about them choosing this pathway? Pooled knowledge, for one. Someone is always keeping an eye on the market. And then when a new product comes out that all of a sudden is very innovative, you will always get copycat solutions. And that's not to say they're stealing intellectual property. It's because someone's identified a need in the market and someone else has said, well, we can compete in that sector. So you end up with choice very quickly. And there's also the OEM pathways where company A doesn't produce a motion sensor and they may OEM badge product from company B in order to fulfill a contract. And that might be that the specifier has said, okay, this airport terminal, we want it done by this manufacturer's product line, and the manufacturer will say, okay, well, we don't have that, but we'll badge up someone else's. And that manufacturer will not badge up anyone else's. They will badge up a manufacturer they have a relationship with and they can trust. It's their name that's going on that sticker. And it shouldn't be considered to be a bad thing. I'm sure you've all come across items where you think that looks just exactly the same as this one from a company I bought a year ago. Could be anything. And the chances are it's all made in the same factory and it's just an OEM product. Products will always be in demand. Development will always be expected from engineers, installers, from consumers, from specifiers, and from legislative changes. And the market continues to grow. Building controls are more and more prominent, and scale can then be expected to drive down costs. And that's a really important thing. We're still in a transition where we are still choosing to not make buildings smart, sustainable, and energy efficient from the outset because of cost. More and more technology is going into buildings, but at the bare bones, we should be making sure that every building we put up can have a lifespan of 100 plus years, can adapt to change, can be utilized for something completely different. It'd be interesting to know how many commercial building spaces in central London have been converted to residential over the last 20, 30 years as demand for floor space fluctuates with recessions and depressions in the economy. But I'm pretty certain that there's been a number of big commercial properties that have changed use completely. And then we've got the additional impact of things like BREEAM, LEED, the race for net zero, the Green Deal, the renewable heat incentive here, and carbon neutral Britain's a fairly new one. And all of these things need to be met. They need to be met by technology that's robust and preferably technology that will slip into place alongside systems and products you already have working hard for you in your home or your building. And that's really important in terms of making sure that a system doesn't all of a sudden fall off the cliff edge and become defunct. And the manufacturers create solutions for money. They're not doing it because they want wholly want a better planet, but if they can produce a better planet and make money at the same time, that's what companies are there for. They want to develop market leading products, then they get the march on everyone else. And in fact, their reputation is all about that. They use high quality, sustainable manufacturing. They sign up to Blue Angel status in Central Europe to ensure their factories are ethically, efficiently, and basically ticking all the boxes that we expect of them now. There's also the reputation. They want their reputational image to be very strong. So they want to source products with resilience, produce products with resilience, and then make the products that meet the latest demands. And they work with industry and governance tirelessly. You'll see big manufacturers working alongside parliamentarians to effect change, to advise on change. And so for them, it's all very interwoven with the whole social status of the country. And they all want to stay relevant and up to date. And by that, that means they're offering the solutions that the market's anticipating. So what would be your next steps? I think you hopefully have come away from this conversation with a bit of information about what an energy efficient system can be and how that can be sustainable in terms of making sure that whatever building control system you fit to a property, it's not going to become consigned to the junk heap within a short period of time. And in fact, you could want it to just go on continuously. There is natural failings with products, a power supply, for instance, transformer that operates your laptop. If you've been using it for 10 years and your laptop still runs, that's a great sign that your laptop still works. But it'd be highly unlikely that your power supply still works because they generally tend to cook themselves. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a constant utilization. So things like power supplies can fail, but you can replace a power supply for fairly low money. You can even get power supplies that turn around and send automated messages that say, I'm failing, there's something wrong. So you can iron out these creases, but all systems will need some form of maintenance. Going back to cars, you wouldn't expect your car to continue from new with a happy manufacturer who's backing up the warranty if you hadn't taken it in for its servicing. So there is an expectation that you would have to do it on a vehicle, and I would suggest that you need to have an expectation that that's what you would should be considering as the minimum for buildings. But hopefully you've picked up on some of this, and I haven't hopefully laboured too heavily on the fact that KNX is the de facto solution to this. But I've built my business around it. I care passionately about it. And in fact, one thing that you will find with the KNX community is they're exceptionally supportive globally. We have a very big community where we share ideas, we share pain points, we talk endlessly about boring engineering things, but we also believe truly in this choice that this particular three-letter symbol is a sign of a guarantee of quality and adaptability and future ability and sustainability. So if you feel you need to find out some more information and you want to make sure that your clients, your customers, yourself, and the wider community get a good viewpoint on what the best solutions to look at are, then you can get in touch with us in several ways. You can come and talk to Tracy, who is our administrator, and she's available via our contact means on the website. You can come to one of our events on an annual basis. So we appear at a couple of big trade fairs, and we put on a summer event where we talk further and produce workshops, give informative guests the chance to convey their information and their experience to our wider audience. We can provide you accredited CPDs, we can provide you non-accredited CPDs, all high quality products, some in development for 15 years. So you're going to be getting first class default English language products about KNX, where you, your team, can learn more and find out more so that you can make informed and assured decisions. Another question would be is if you have a network of people that you think could benefit from this. So one of the areas we're very keen to expand our presence in is education, and that's young engineers, young students who are following courses into technology. One of the biggest areas of demand for individuals in the future is engineering. There is a huge understanding that actually this is where one of the biggest growth areas for youngsters is going to be is in engineering. And I know from my own children's experience, places at universities are very highly contested. So we would love to take advantage of any entry point we can get into these institutions where we can talk further about building controls in general, and then hopefully with KNX as the specific in the background. We still don't, as I alluded to earlier, have a program of building controls or knowledge within this sphere in our electrical apprentices at colleges at the moment. And that's a crying shame. In Western Europe, it's a de facto part of the syllabus in many of the countries. In some European countries, having a building control system is mandatory now. And in fact, in several of these countries, KNX is specified as something that achieves this, and also something that would be expected to meet the requirements of this in a building in the future. So we'd encourage you to get in touch and speak to us further. Ask any questions you feel are pertinent. No questions insignificant, and every interaction is important for us. As I said a moment ago, we're true believers in this solution to a technological need and providing outcomes that are effective, cost effective, sustainable for our customers, clients, and people we interact with is absolutely where we want to be. So if we could provide you with any further information, please let us know, however that works, and we will do our best to inform you. And I would just like to close by saying thank you for coming to our event. I hope you found it useful and the information is something new that you haven't heard before. And I would just like to wish the whole of the KNX community internationally every success with the rest of this KNX's Sustainable Initiative this November. and thank Brussels for providing us with opportunities to promote KNX within our territories and share the information globally. Thank you very much for coming. Have a fantastic Wednesday.